The Tribunal of the Holy Office of the Inquisition, commonly known as the Spanish Inquisition, was established in 1478 by Catholic monarchs Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile. It was intended to maintain Catholic orthodoxy in their kingdoms and to replace the medieval Inquisition, which was under papal control. It became the most substantive of the three different manifestations of the wider Christian Inquisition, along with the Roman Inquisition and Portuguese Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition may be defined broadly, operating in Spain and in all Spanish colonies and territories, which included the Canary Islands, the Spanish Netherlands, the Kingdom of Naples, and all Spanish possessions in North, Central, and South America. For the period during which Portugal and Spain were under common rule, consult Portuguese Inquisition and Goa Inquisition. The Inquisition was originally intended in large part to ensure the orthodoxy of those who converted from Judaism and Islam. This regulation of the faith of the newly converted was intensified after the royal decrees issued in 1492 and 1501 ordering Jews and Muslims to convert or leave Spain. The body was initiated and under the control of the Spanish monarchy. It was not definitively abolished until 1834, during the reign of Isabella II, after a period of declining influence in the previous century. Various motives have been proposed for the monarch's decision to found the Inquisition, such as increasing political authority, weakening opposition, suppressing conversos, profiting from confiscation of the property of convicted heretics, reducing social tensions, and protecting the kingdom from the danger of a fifth column. The Spanish Inquisition is often cited in popular literature and history as an example of Catholic intolerance and repression. Modern historians have tended to question earlier and wildly exaggerated accounts concerning the severity of the Inquisition. Henry Carman asserts that the myth of the all-powerful, torture-mad Inquisition is largely an invention of 19th-century Protestant authors with an agenda to discredit the papacy. According to actual records, the Spanish Inquisition was widely hailed as the best-run, most humane court in Europe. There are records of people committing blasphemy in secular courts so they could have their case fall under the Inquisition's jurisdiction. Further, the Inquisition was the first to pronounce Europe's witch hunt a delusion and prohibited anyone from being tried or burnt for witchcraft. A symposium commissioned in 1998 to study the Inquisition based on the actual newly released records released its findings. The total number of accused heretics put to death during the Spanish Inquisition comprised 0.1% of the more than 40,000 who were tried. In some cases, the Inquisition saved heretics from secular authorities. Previous Inquisitions. The Inquisition was created through papal bull, ad abellendam, issued at the end of the 12th century by Pope Lucius III as a way to combat the Albigensian heresy in southern France. There were a huge number of tribunals of the Papal Inquisition in various European kingdoms during the Middle Ages. In the Kingdom of Aragon, a tribunal of the Papal Inquisition was established by the Statute of Excommunicamus of Pope Gregory IX in 1232. During the era of the Albigensian heresy, its principal representative was Ramon de Peñafort. With time, its importance was diluted, and, by the middle of the 15th century, it was almost forgotten, although still there according to the law. There was never a tribunal of the Papal Inquisition in Castile. Members of the episcopate were charged with surveillance of the faithful and punishment of transgressors. During the Middle Ages, in Castile, little attention was paid to heresy by the Catholic ruling class. Jews and Muslims were tolerated and generally allowed to follow their traditional laws and customs in domestic matters. However, by law, they were considered inferior to Catholics and were subject to discriminatory legislation. The Spanish Inquisition can be seen as an answer to the multi-religious nature of Spanish society following the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula from the Muslim Moors. After invading in 711, large areas of the Iberian Peninsula were ruled by Muslims until 1250, when they were restricted to Granada, which fell in 1492. However, the Reconquista did not result in the total expulsion of Muslims from Spain, since they, along with Jews, were tolerated by the ruling Christian elite. Large cities, especially Seville, Valladolid and Barcelona, had significant Jewish populations centered in Juderia. But in the coming years the Muslims were increasingly subjugated by alienation and torture. The Jews, who had previously thrived under Muslim rule, now suffered similar maltreatment. Post-Reconquest medieval Spain has been characterized by Americo Castro and some other Iberianists as a society of convivencia, that is, relatively peaceful coexistence, albeit punctuated by occasional conflict among the ruling Catholics and the Jews and Muslims. However, as Henry Carman notes, so-called convivencia was always a relationship between unequals, despite their legal inequality. There was a long tradition of Jewish service to the Crown of Aragon, and Jews occupied many important posts, both religious and political. Castile itself had an unofficial rabbi. Ferdinand's father John II named the Jewish Abiathar Crescas to be court astronomer. Several responses bearing on the widespread persecution of Spanish Jewry between the years 1390 and 1391 can be found in contemporary Jewish sources, such as in the response of Rabbi Isaac ben Sheshet, and in the seminal writing of Gedalia ibn Yechia, Shalshlet ha-Kabbalah, as also in Abraham Zacuto's Sefer Yuchason, in Solomon ibn Verga's Shevet Yehuda, as well as in a letter written to the Jews of Avignon by Don Haste Crescas in the winter of 1391 concerning the events in Spain in the year 1391. According to Don Haste Crescas, persecution against Jews began in earnest in Seville in 1391, on the first day of the lunar month Tammuz. From there the violence spread to Córdoba, and by the 17th day of the same lunar month, it had reached Toledo in the region of Castile. From there, the violence had spread to Majorca, and by the first day of the lunar month Elul it had also reached the Jews of Barcelona in Catalonia, where the slain were estimated at 250. So, too, many Jews who resided in the neighboring provinces of Lerida and Gironda and in the Kingdom of Valencia had been affected, as were also the Jews of Al-Andalus, whereas many died a martyr's death, while others converted in order to save themselves. Encouraged by the preaching of Ferron Martinez, Archdeacon of Ecija, the general unrest affected nearly all of the Jews in Spain, during which time an estimated 200,000 Jews changed their religion or else concealed their religion, becoming known in Hebrew as Anasim, meaning those who are compelled to hide their religion. Only a handful of the more principal persons of the Jewish community managed to escape, who had found refuge among the viceroys in the outlying towns and districts. Forced baptism was contrary to the law of the Catholic Church, and theoretically anybody who had been forcibly baptized could legally return to Judaism. This, however, was very narrowly interpreted. Legal definitions of the time theoretically acknowledged that a forced baptism was not a valid sacrament, but confined this to cases where it was literally administered by physical force. A person who had consented to baptism under threat of death or serious injury was still regarded as a voluntary convert, and accordingly forbidden to revert to Judaism. After the public violence, many of the converted felt it safer to remain in their new religion. Thus, after 1391, a new social group appeared and were referred to as conversos or New Christians. Many conversos, now freed from the anti-Semitic restrictions imposed on Jewish employment, attained important positions in 15th-century Spain, including positions in the government and in the church. Among many others, physicians Andrés Laguna and Francisco López Villalobos, writers Juan de Enzina, Juan de Mena, Diego de Valera and Alonso de Palencia, and bankers Luis de Santangel and Gabriel Sanchez were all conversos. Conversos, not without opposition, managed to attain high positions in the ecclesiastical hierarchy, at times becoming severe detractors of Judaism. Some even received titles of nobility, and as a result, during the following century some works attempted to demonstrate that virtually all of the nobles of Spain were descended from Israelites.